I very nearly called this episode Building a Team to Support You instead of following your own inspiration, because that state of building a team is actually the current phase that Kate Schroeder is in, and it's an absolute inspiration to listen to how she's been able to pivot and shift this business over time into being something, quite frankly, more successful than most of us maybe even allow ourselves to dream about. But as someone who's been burning the midnight oil far too many nights over the course of the last 12 years of my own self-employment, I'm particularly excited to share the ways in which Kate is building this growth in a sustainable way for her own health and for the benefit of her team. Here's a spoiler alert quote in case your finger is still hovering over that next button. From Kate. It can be really easy as a small business owner and a maker and all of these things to not sleep. And that's hugely important. So number 1, get at least 7 hours of sleep. Number 2, if you are starting to find that you do not have enough hours in the day to do what you're doing, find help. Now, you all know I'm rereading that quote from Kate as my own personal reminder as well. So enough of this intro from me. Let's get straight to this week's conversation with Kate Schroeder. Welcome to The Maker's Playbook, the podcast where we talk all about what it's really like to make a living from the things we make. I'm your host, Rebecca Ikes Kara. Hey, Kate, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thanks for making the time. I still don't have a good transition of how to start these interviews, so I'm just gonna... Somebody help me. A year and a half later, and I'm still like, what's next?
Well, I start. I think that's how almost every podcast I listen to starts, though. They're just like, they either have this tagline that's well flushed out and they hardly get through it, or it's just a,
So, let's just go to the obvious. For people who don't know who I'm talking to, how would you introduce yourself?
My name is Kate Schroeder, and I am a ceramic artist out of Kansas City.
Wait, which Kansas City?
The Missouri side. I mean, the real side, Kansas City.
I mean, coming from someone who grew up near a place called Milan, Illinois, who's now married to an Italian who's like, I'm sorry, what is this town? You know, we have
a Versailles, Missouri instead of Versailles. So
yep, we really mucked some stuff up, but we won't go down that trajectory. Have you always been in Kansas City?
I grew up in Kansas City and then went to school for undergrad in a place called Warrensburg, Missouri, which is about an hour kind of southeast of Kansas City. And then for graduate school, I actually moved all the way to Fairbanks, Alaska to do my MFA. And after grad school, I applied to 42 jobs in 37 states. And the one job I got was right back in Kansas City.
Sweet home, Kansas City.
Yep. Oh and gosh, I planned on moving away again and then met my husband and he's here and both our families are here. So I'm here.
They're happy about it.
Exactly.
I love it. Okay, hold on. 42 jobs in 37 states. I just love the reality of anyone who's potentially coming out of grad school. Yeah, that's...
Yep. It's a lot. I mean, my thesis, luckily, I mean, it's weird. This is 10 years ago. Exactly. So my thesis was in April of 2012. Mm-hmm. And right after the opening of that, once I'd turned in the papers and had the review, I had the rest of the semester of just being there that I just took that all of my time to apply for jobs. And I shot really big. I was mostly applying for full-time jobs because I knew I was going to have to move at minimum 2,000 miles because that is Alaska, how pretty much far away it is even from Seattle. So I was trying to find a job worth my time versus an adjunct position where, you know, sometimes you can be paid $500 a month to teach with a master's. And that's why I was applying for the bigger jobs. And I didn't get one originally. I did get an adjunct job right out of the gate, but then moving back to Kansas City allowed me to get a full-time job in the arts as well. So it ended up sort of being meant to be. I just didn't know it at the time.
This is the thing that I laugh about pointing out in these conversations because I am absolute utter garbage at reminding myself, right? Like I have a plan and I want to stick to that plan and I want this plan to go like this. And then it's like, oh, right. If I look at like the best things in my life, they were things that I
It was not the plan at all.
Exactly. So was your MFA in ceramics? You like, this was always going to be the thing you knew? You're one of those unicorn potters?
Yes and no. So my BFA and my MFA are actually in sculpture. When I started undergrad, I was going for art education with an emphasis in ceramics. And I got a little ways into it, and the longer I was in it, the more I realized that I didn't want to teach, the K through 12 programs, and that if I wanted to teach, what I really wanted to teach was at the collegiate level. And then I discovered sculpture and realized I could still use clay, but I could also use every other material under the sun. And so I was very into that. So my BFA, even though I have the credits for both degrees, it's in sculpture. And my MFA is just in sculpture. And for the most part, I just worked in other materials and would generally have like, here's a little bit of clay in there, but it was a lot of metal casting and woodworking and found objects. And then I might make an element out of ceramic, but I had really pulled back away from clay as a whole. And what was really involved in welding and bronze casting and things like that. So you kind of use maybe clay to start the sculpture, but it's not what it is in the end.
Yeah. I just got a picture of you being this like badass with a welding mask and fire and molten metals and like in a room full of bros and being like, let me show you how it's done, gentlemen.
That's actually kind of where I think a big part of it was that is me proving to the boys club that I could do it. Going to Alaska, I mean, that's a boys club. And no question about it.
Also worked on a fishing boat in the summer, just ticked all the boxes.
Some of the other MFA sculpture grads started to be like the females were pipe fitters and things, so all the female sculpture grads up there, we all kind of had that same mentality of, the anything you can do, I can do better. and we're going to do it while being told, necessarily that you can't. Also, when I moved up there, it was important because the sculpture professor was a woman. So that was something that I really wanted to study with. The ceramics professor was a male, and it was flip-flopped for my undergrad. So my undergrad ceramics professor was female and male sculpture professor. So.
Cool. Which program was it in? Just because I didn't even know Fairbanks had an MFA. Like this, that sounds so ignorant of me. And I have been to Alaska more than once, but I'm like, oh, wait, what?
Yeah. So Alaska, it's University of Alaska Fairbanks, and I think is the only program that offers the MFA. University of Alaska Anchorage has a BFA program. It's still the University of Alaska, but UAF is the biggest school of all of the cities.
So then what was kind of was the ultimate plan to get like a 10-year teaching position and call it done? And I guess maybe I even missed this. I might have lived under a log on Instagram. Are you still teaching full time?
Nope.
Or are you just like, rocking that USPS connection that you have with
I'm
all
rocking
your
the
shop
USPS
updates?
connection, which actually my USPS connection is gone. My sexy mailman now works with me in my business. So
that makes me a little sad while also excited for you. I'm not sure which.
I think that's kind of the general consensus. And I had started hearing a lot of people say that they were really sad that I wasn't posting any more sexy mailman videos. And so now I'm trying to add them back in as sexy assistant videos.
There we go. All right. I was like, your business is literally going to be the thing that saves the USPS. One, from like volume of packages, but also two, just from pure marketing gold.
Right. Yeah, no, we're glad he's not. His knee is just destroyed from it. So That was one of the biggest push factors for having him leave. He's also in the middle of an MBA, so having more time to dedicate to school than just a physical labor job is great.
Ceramics is definitely the low physicality.
Comparatively, yeah, he was walking about 20 miles a day before. So, yeah, he's enjoying the fact that he does not have to do that anymore.
Okay, I'm going to just completely skip then. We're going to go from like historical Kate to present day, because that is a huge flippin' deal to be able to support your livelihood. You know, it's hard enough. I'm just excited because there are not that many of us, I find, at least in my constant search to interview people, that is a household completely reliant on self-employed ceramics.
Yeah, it's weird and wonderful and, you know, something that I'm really proud of and never could have imagined when I was first starting off. You know, I think my first year of making, I was so happy that I made like $5,000 in the year. And it's just like, man, oh man, I'm going to tell my tax guy to add this income. And now it's really different of being able to support the family. And there are some things that, you know, now we are figuring out health insurance as a fully self-employed household and retirement accounts. Those are two huge things because, I mean, that was one big thing he had to give up is not just it's, you know, the government version of a 401k. And I mean, that had a 5% matching, which is so high. And he had a pension. So to give both of those things up, it took a lot of discussion as a family of what we should do. And, you know, we went with give those things up. And now we're just going to figure out retirement and health insurance on our own. So it's been working. This actually has been since November. He quit right before Thanksgiving because that's when USPS gets real wild. So we kind of
can't imagine why.
Yeah. But we planned it out to where he could not have to deal with the holiday season and the worst of Kansas City winters and start working inside. And now he is my wholesale and fulfillment manager. So every package that you get, he is packaging it up. He hasn't started packaging the Shelfies yet. He's a little afraid to package the super fragile things, but all of the mini Malm burners and all of that stuff is him, is kind of, he's starting to take the lead of. My assistant, Katie, she did it a lot more before him, so she really helps. You know, she's more or less training him on that. And I, for the first time, am really not packaging. And it's kind of nice that I can just be making instead.
I love that that's also the most like tangential career shift is like, okay, so you know how you always used to carry these?
Yeah.
Now you have to put them together.
Right. Yeah. Now he still is doing the mail. He's just on the other end of it.
Right. He's just like chatting with his old coworker that comes to the house.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's a different station, but our new carrier, the carrier at my new studio, his name is Jose. And so we just have conversations with him about USPS. And he's kind of like shocked that we know so much.
Okay, I just want to give everybody a super clear picture because I am amazed by what you are succeeding at, what you guys are doing. You've moved your studio out of the house, so you have a separate studio. You had an assistant before. You still have that assistant. Plus your husband's working full time with you. This is literally the dream as far as a ceramics business, you know, as far as the people who are thinking, I want to make a living from the things I make. I mean,
yeah, it feels pretty great. You know, it's wild that starting at the $5,000, and I had a CPA at the time. I started off with a CPA because my first year out of grad school, I had lived in 3 states and worked in 3 states and with lots of, you know, self-employed of a small amount and then serving and then adjuncting and then starting a full-time job. So I just thought it would be better to have somebody help me. And he's retired and he's gotten rid of most of his clients, but he's like, I'm just enjoying watching the business grow. So as long as I can do this, I'm gonna stick with you. And I love that because he was actually my parents' CPA when they first got married. So it was easy enough to he already knew me, even though I didn't know him. So it's been fun having him help. I just go to him once a year just for taxes, but having him put into numbers, or I'm not a numbers person, even though as a business owner, you sort of have to be in a way, but have him show the growth like on a little plot chart, you know, where things are going.
My hardest thing was always, you know, it was always almost a surprise each year that you were still making it work. And so I would never I would get in this bad habit of I would plan for the worst and hope for the best. And so I would
Absolutely.
never assume, which is, it's not a bad habit. That is a safe and good risk averse thing to do. But I would never like my CPA would put in like this cash flow spreadsheet, like estimates of how much revenue I would have each month. And I would look at those estimates. I can't do that much in a month. Are you crazy? And she was like, Rebecca, you did it last year. You did it last month.
Yeah.
And I was like, really? I made that much money? Like, because you don't actually make that much money.
Right,
You know what I mean? Like, it's not like
a lot is going out
account.
when stuff is coming in. You know, I just did a big sale because of how much I owed for my 2021 taxes. So for the first time, I did like a 21% off sale. And while the money is in my bank account, it very much so was not in my bank account the week before because I had to write. April has just been the most expensive month of my life, and former me would not understand the amount of money that I'm paying to the government right now. And that retirement account, which I'm seeing that as taxes, quote unquote, because it's money that left my account. But I didn't start saving for retirement until I was 36. So, you know, and especially being self-employed, I'm trying to save a lot each year, and I'm seeing it as money that's not mine. Because I don't want to see it for 30 years.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. It never even crosses your mind that you could have access to it. Yeah.
Yes.
Like I totally understand the comparison to taxes, because taxes are like, you know what? 30% of this I'm never even going to see. So we're not even going to think about it. That's just over here.
Yep.
Have you read the book Profit First yet?
No, I have not.
You might like it. I suggest it to everyone listening anyway, but it is it's like a wonderful regular person's conversation about thinking about finances for a business as opposed to what CPAs actually learn. Like the way accountants are taught as opposed to like real life kind of way to think about it. Basically, the overarching concept, and then we'll move on, is accountants are taught that profit, the math equation for profit is like revenue minus expenses equals your profit. And the author's hypothesis, if you will, or argument is that's all fine, except for that kind of makes profit like whatever accidentally is left over.
Right.
Instead of revenue minus profit equals expenses, which basically forces you as a business owner to control how much you're spending in the business in order to make sure that you do actually have a profit and that you can actually sustain this business as opposed to it being like a hopeful accident.
Right. No, yeah, I like that.
Up until 2020, you know, we were on this great up and to the right trajectory of photography business, right? And so I was always reinvesting in the business, putting money back into the business. And I never fully recognized how much revenue I was bringing in, and I was still paying myself at such a low level. And like thinking, okay, I gotta keep going, not realizing not really dug into this equation, if you will, I would have paid myself a much more livable wage.
Right.
And
yeah.
And probably not done as many fun things as I did in the business, but you know, retirement.
Exactly.
So Profit First.
Yeah.
Anyways, read it, listen to it, whatever. Hopefully it's helpful.
Perfect.
But this is actually, I love that we've kind of gone down this hole too, because these are the kind of the conversations of why I started this podcast. Is like nobody's sitting around talking about like, okay, finances aren't sexy. Nobody wants to talk about it, but it's also one of the greatest fears of when you do decide, okay, I want to go full time. I love this so much. Let's do it. And it's like, okay, well, do you know your numbers?
Right.
Do you know, what you're going to need to put away for retirement or what you're going to need for healthcare? And how does all of that work? And how many pots do you have to sell to make all of that work? And,
you have to find your magic number. How much money do I have to make a month? And that number for me changed drastically when my husband started working with me. It's just like, okay, this is not the best month numbers anymore. This is the minimum month number. So let's do what we can for that. And, so far so good. Let's just hope, I have the fear all the time of it's just all going to come crashing down. The way that my brain works, and so trying to make it not, but, it's kind of that what you're saying, like hoping for the best. But or whatever. You know,
Yep.
you know the phrase.
Yep.
I'm messing it up.
Yep. Planning for the worst and hoping for the
Yes,
best.
exactly.
But, and the sad part is, like, I'm 12 years in and I still think that it's not going to work.
Mhm.
Which, like, I have so many years of social proof that it is going to work.
Right.
And it's just, I don't know if it's some lizard brain survival instinct or whatever it is, but
I'm sure there's part of that. And then, just the new imposter syndrome. The culture that is like more talked about, or maybe we just feel it more because we see the successes on social media or what have you. So,
or even the perceived successes, right? Oh my gosh, so and so is being featured on West Elm or Starbucks or whatever, and it's like, oh, that person actually still works another job.
Right. I had a friend who is a candle maker and had a wholesale order through Home Goods. And I was so curious, like, how is like a gigantic store like that for a small business? Like, how did that work? And he just said, well, I won't do it again. So sometimes it seems that those huge things, and I'm sure this is not for everyone, but for my friend, it was not this amazing thing that he thought it might be.
Yep, that's a great point.
Yeah.
That's such a great point. So walk us back a little bit of when you started selling your work and kind of that real life trajectory of how long it did take to get to this point, to be able to be the earner of that.
I'll just kind of give the brief. So I finished undergrad in 2009 and then went straight to grad school and finished grad school in 2012, moved back to Kansas City, got an adjunct teaching job at Kansas City, Kansas Community College. So I've done my fair share of the Kansas City, Kansas side, which actually State Line Road from my house is less than a mile. So we really do live in one of those cities that next door to one another. So got that adjunct position. And then shortly after that, I got a full-time teaching position. Well, full-time, I was a program manager for a nonprofit that specialized in teaching art to people with disabilities. And at that nonprofit, I taught at the Kansas State School for the Blind. I was the visual arts teacher at that school. And then that nonprofit also owned a small community ceramic studio called Epic Clay Studio, which is for every person inclusive culture. And that was a neighborhood community studio / a studio that people from around the city with physical and cognitive disabilities could come and we would teach them ceramics. So through that experience and starting to work at Epic is when I kind of started to make pots again. I hadn't made pots since undergrad. And my thesis for my MFA was really about a lot of like traumatic experiences that I had gone through in undergrad. And so it was deep and heavy subject matter. And then it actually caused me to take 11 months off of art making, which is the longest time I had ever gone through since I was tiny. I've been just making art my whole life. And then right after grad school, it's like, I just can't right now. I got the jobs, and then at Epic, I was starting to having to teach throwing classes. And so I started making pots then. And then my goal for making work was just, I want to make a cup because it holds water. End of concept. And so I made thousands of cups and they didn't have any sort of a theme to them. They stylistically didn't even look the same. I was just like, I'm going to make one this time that has swirls on it, and this one's gonna have birds on it, and this one, it was just that very exploratory thing. So I kind of felt, in a sense, like I was starting from ground zero, because even though I had a master's of fine arts, I did not understand how to make pots. I made some pots in undergrad, but that was never my focus there either. So I made some terrible pots. So I was at Epic and Accessible Arts, the nonprofit, for about 3.5 years. And then in 2016, I went to Tanzania and started a ceramics program with an NGO down there called Walk in Love, which is a program that their mission is to keep families together. And one of the ways that they can do that is giving women the opportunity to have employment while their children are being watched. So in Tanzania, and it's been a long time, this is 2016, so my figures might be wrong. I think that on average, women care for 7 children, not all of them being their own children. And so even though the children in orphanage rate can be much higher there. It's not because women want to give these kids up for adoption. It's because they just cannot feed families this large and they can't care for themselves. And if they can't care for themselves, they can't care for children. And so what this NGO does is employment to these women and puts the children into either daycare or school. And so what we did was start a small ceramics program that was at least for the women who could walk to this area and make small pots that they could then sell at some of their shops. So that was just a summer that I was there. And then I came back and left Accessible Arts. And at that point, I thought, I'm just going to adjunct at my one school. And I think I'm like to this point because I'd been doing art and craft festivals regionally for a while. And so my goal was to mostly sustain my living on the art and craft shows and a small amount of adjuncting. And then my alma mater for undergrad called, and they really wanted someone to teach their ideas in the visual arts class, which is basically like an art appreciation class, by a studio artist who had a great deal of knowledge in art history. And they wanted somebody with an MFA, but who could teach these art history style classes. And my mentor from undergrad called me.
I love that, like, upper education is like, we kind of just want everything, and it's an adjunct position.
Yeah.
Like, this sounds normal. This sounds like I'm
Right.
I just need to explain my reaction over here on the other side of the screen. Like, yep, that's how that tracks.
So my mentor from my alma mater called and, wanting this unicorn position of all of these things. And the one upside to this job was that in the adjunct world, there's no full-time, right? It's all part-time. Right. And you never know if you're going to have a job, so on and so forth. So this position was considered full-time, part-time, permanent position. So let me break that down for you. Full-time adjunct. It was full-time adjunct. So that was 9 credit hours at one institution. It was part-time because, I'm not full-time, which would have to be...
You're not on a 10-year track. You're not getting, you're not being reviewed in a few years or whatever.
Right. And then permanent position was because it was just a humanities requirement. And so this position wasn't going to go anywhere, which was the biggest thing. The person who left this position had been there for 10 years and she was moving out of state. So that's why this one was, well, it's certainly, it's not full-time. I don't want to do full-time. I don't want to be on a million committees. So this is good. And it was 3 days a week of only 3 hours because I taught 1 class, 2 class, 3 class. It was right back to back. So I lectured for 3 hours straight. I lectured the same lecture 3 times in a row, and then I could leave. One of the biggest downsides was it was an hour away, so my commute was murder. But luckily, in the couple years that I did it, I was able to go to like hybrid style classes, and that was quite helpful. But that first semester that I decided to teach there, and my original plan, like I said, was to be almost full-time maker with some adjunct classes. I ended up teaching 16 credit hours because I was still teaching at another university. And that was awful. I was teaching studio classes, I was teaching lecture classes, and I still had all the requirements of all these shows that I had signed up for.
What year is this? 2016?
17. I got back from Africa in 2016. So maybe it was because I did that in the summer. So I guess it would have been the year. Yeah. It was probably the fall.
The school year of
semester
2016, 2017.
Yeah. So after that, I quit Kansas Community College. I left them because that one was not, I never knew. Like I would sign up to teach 3 classes and sometimes I'd teach 1 class. And, you can't plan that way. And then I was just doing University of Central Missouri, which is my alma mater that I went down for, and doing all of the craft shows. And then after a long amount of talking with my husband, I was like, my heart is not in teaching. This is what my whole life kind of went towards, was the idea of like first a degree in art education and then I'll just teach. And then my program, even through my MFA, was very academic heavy of like, this is how you get a teaching job. And then I realized that I didn't want to. I think I had a couple of semesters of just students that just really wore me down, especially because I was teaching non-majors and people that were just like so blatant in my face about this doesn't matter. I'm teaching you art history. This is not art history. This is history. This is the visual representation of humanity. How does that not matter? And so as a family, we decided that even though I didn't feel like my business was ready, he was at USPS, he had that, the good income, he had the health insurance that I was on. And it was a jump that I was able to, for the first time ever, put all of my attention towards my business. And that first year was hard. It was a leap of faith and hoping. And a couple of things that happened was after I had made the decision. So the semester that I decided not to do it anymore, I got 1 week into that semester before I told my boss I'm not coming back. Because the previous semester I had told her, I think I'm done. And then she convinced me to do it. But that was the time she's like, you only have to come 1 day a week. I mean, the rest can be hybrid, and feeling wanted like that is also really nice. But yeah, 1 week into the next semester, I said, I just can't, if I want to come back, I'll let you know. But so I decided to leave. And then it was also that semester that I changed my entire body of work. After I told her, I was just like, I'm sick of teaching and I'm sick of what I'm making. I changed everything. And that was very hard because I didn't already have an established base of people who knew what my work was, which my work was known locally well because I did lots of shows around town. And, I'd kind of drive, a day's drive to different shows and stuff like that. But I was very scared of changing my work because I knew what that would get me relatively as far as an income if I did this show, that show, blah, blah, blah. But I think I was also tapping myself out of my markets. I find that in Kansas City, a lot of the handmade markets that started off as very much so a celebration of the handmade started to turn into small businesses that were like, wow, people seeing how successful a lot of the makers were and then just jumping in on those coattails that were not makers. These were just people who, at best, nothing at all against graphic designers. Graphic designers are amazing, but these were at best designers who then had their stuff printed on a shirt, not even locally. Yeah. And, it was all this, it was nothing but Kansas City that and Kansas City this. And, and it's and then
it's like what Etsy's
yes.
massive,
yes.
We're both drinking out of these reusable water, mm-hmm. How many handmade, it's a metal water bottle that's mass produced somewhere and you put a design, and coming from the girl with the graphic design degree, yeah. which is why I laugh so hard.
It's just not a handmade
object. The designing
object.
is a skill,
yeah.
but the object is not handmade. What you're selling is a design.
Yeah.
You could sell the EPS file.
I think it kind of came to a head for me when one of the local newspapers, one of the journalists went to a store. I'm not going to name it, even though your audience is probably not a lot here, but it's basically things that are created in this city. Is, okay. Another name
yeah.
of that.
I feel like Chicago
every and we have those
yeah.
stores. And so this,
it's like the I Heart NY
right,
store,
yeah.
Everybody. Yeah.
And these stores are very touted for being these handmade and things like that. And so this journalist not going to write a story. She was just being a human out going to a store, and she bought a cute little pot, and then she bought a cute little succulent to put in the pot, and then she came home, and the succulent was from one of our local nurseries, and the pot was just empty. And so when she got home, she went to plant it, and by the time she flipped it over and it still had a Made in China sticker on the bottom of it. And she's like, I bought this at Made in KC. Oop, okay, so that's the name of the store. Accidental. So this was already yep. in the news. This is not new news. And so the journalist wrote a story on it being from a store that said it was made here, and the sticker literally said Made in China on it. And this was something that I'd already been starting to talk about with some of the people around, to say I'm competing with people who are selling mugs that are the clear, just that straight cylinder diner style mug with something printed on there, and they're selling them for $12, and I'm over here trying to sell just a $40 mug, which is not an expensive mug at all. And people are scoffing at my prices. And so that was kind of a turning point for me, that I was like, well, I don't want to make this work anymore, because in the markets that I'm selling it at, it isn't understood. I also have a jewelry line that I don't advertise for at all. It's all based on my experience of teaching art at the School for the Blind. It's a Braille jewelry line, and I wholesale with the National Braille Press and things like that. So I was doing those at craft shows at that time, and that was fine. It's like a $30 necklace. It's unique, okay.
That sounds amazing. I'm like, okay, now I'm going to go Google that.
Right? Just Google Braille jewelry and I'm sure you'll find me. But so I wanted my ceramic work to just be art again because I had this MFA and then somehow I was like, my MFA was in sculpture and then all of a sudden I was a production potter slinging wares at local like Oktoberfests and things like that. And okay, I want to get back to my roots. And so I had quit my job and I'd quit making pots. And then I just decided I'm going to just make stuff. And one of the things that I'm very passionate about is plants. And, you and I were looking at my plant room before we started this call. And so I started putting a lot of succulents and cacti and things onto these strange vessels. And at that point, I didn't even think of Instagram as a way I could market or anything. I'd been on Instagram for years and had maybe amassed, I think I was at like 2,000 followers. And I'd just been hanging out at that level for a long time. And then I started posting this work that my goal was, I don't even care about selling this. I'll just live off the jewelry line and I'll make art to be art. Art for art's sake again, because I haven't done that in so long.
And you thought you were getting out of academia?
I mean, yeah. So
I love that. I love it.
I started making that work, and then it really just suddenly started kind of hitting a nerve in social media, and I got shared by a few bigger accounts, and I started to see a big uptick in the followers, and people were just asking like, how do I buy it? And I was like, I don't know, I don't sell online. Like, you want to come to a craft shop? And so I converted my website to take sales, and I decided my update, other people do it. Okay, they say they're going to update their website at this date and time, and I didn't think I needed to be around for it or like present for that, because I didn't see it as something that would sell quickly. It was just would be there. And I remember it was also in April. We've had a couple of April things that are lining up. And I was still teaching because it was that semester that I set my thing for noon, and my class started at noon. And so I was standing at my podium and I was starting to take roll, and then I was going to start lecturing, and my phone was sitting on my podium just to be my clock. And it started just flashing. Sale, 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 sale.
Please tell me you used some website platform that also made the cha-ching every time that you get.
I did not. I was not on that, and my phone was on silent because I was teaching, and I had a strict policy about phones, so I couldn't be the one.
Clearly.
I remember even telling my class, like, guys, I think we need to start a second late. Something is happening. And I was looking at my phone like, understand this, and it was the strangest thing. And I was so in this place of, I don't think I can make this work because I've just changed all this body of work. That's the reason I thought I quit, and I've changed it all. And that was the moment where I saw the power of the internet, and I saw the power of not going to local shows anymore and selling from the comfort of whatever I was doing. And that's where I saw the power of being able to make sales while I worked another job if I needed to, which had never, when you do shows, my God, that's a weekend minimum of hard labor. And I'm fairly introverted, so then I'd have to go into this introvert coma to recharge after a weekend of sales. And so that's the moment I decided to really start working towards using social media and my own website to market and sell my wares.
And when was that shop launch? I say launch as if like it was this big.
Yeah.
I love it.
April of 2018. So 4 years ago.
4 years ago.
Mm-hmm. And that was the first time I sold online. Since then, I have just kind of continued to work on that. And now I have absolutely no fear of changing my work because that's who I am as an artist. I thrive on exploration and creativity. And if I am feeling stagnant in something, I can change it. And I'm so lucky that my following supports that and encourages it and wants to see what I'm going to do next.
And also, even if they don't, like your recognition, the thing I wrote down in my notes as you were talking is you recognize that it was a misfit with your market, not that it was, I have to change my work in order to sell to this market, but I'm going to go find new people.
Yeah.
Because there are plenty of people out there to sell my work
Right.
to. And if I want to make something else, I'm going to find those people once you figure out the thing that you like to make, as opposed to it's not selling, I have to change me.
Right. And so that actually is so perfect. So, we're recording a podcast, and a quote that I've learned from a podcast, a different one, which is a popular one. And so my favorite murder, I'm sure a lot of people have heard of it. Karen Kilgariff there.
I love how that's going to connect. I'm really looking forward to this.
Karen Kilgariff has a quote that is local jokes get local work. And the first time I heard her say that, or the first time I registered her say that, was when I was in the transition of getting my market out of local market into an international market. And I say that to myself all of the time now. I don't write jokes, but to me, it's, if you slap KC on something, there's only one place you can sell that, and that's where I am. Just make what you want to make and don't let a market dictate it. Then you can sell anywhere. And so now I'm very happy to say that my work is on all 7 continents, including Antarctica, and it's bonkers.
I want to hear about this Antarctica thing before you move on. I know you're going to have more to say, but I need to put a pin on this and I'm sorry, what?
Okay. This was actually a follower of mine who I posted the first time I sent a package. I sent something to Singapore, and I was so excited. I said, I'm finally on 6 continents. You just can't get better than that. And one of my followers was like, well, what about Antarctica? And I was like, well, you don't really send packages to Antarctica. Very select people go there, and they don't live there. They just go there. And she said, I'll make this happen for you. And I was like, what? And so she's like, if you send me something small, one of my close friends is going to Antarctica, and as long as it's small, she can bring it. And so I made and sold her, it was a little necklace of a little planter box of just had like a little cactus in it. And she sent it to her friend, and her friend took it to Antarctica and took pictures of it at the South Pole. So
oh my gosh.
now, even though, granted, it does not live there, I don't think she left it there, but I just say my work is on all 7 continents because I have a picture of one of my pieces at the South Pole, and that's pretty neat.
That's amazing. And also, just the percentage of people who have ever been to Antarctica.
Right.
I mean, okay, one of your followers is a research scientist.
Yep.
What are the options here?
Right? I mean, it was just the perfect, because not even all of your followers see every post that you post.
Awesome.
The fact that she saw it at that time and wanted to do something about it and then did it is just so cool, and shows just what a wild community the internet can bring together. It's just so neat. I feel so lucky to have found this community.
I also really love that you pointed out that as an introvert, in-person markets were draining, and that the internet and a platform like Instagram has allowed you to grow this business, because I think a lot of people think I'm an introvert, so I can't be successful on Instagram.
Oh no,
and
you can.
It's hold on, you just have to find your own way with it.
Well, and I will say, so one of the biggest ways that my introversion shows on Instagram is if I have a post that gets a lot of comments, I get very overwhelmed. And at best, I will heart the comment. Because if there's a post that has 200 comments on there, my social anxiety sort of takes over, even though I'm not with these people. But it's the idea, to me, I feel very disingenuous saying, thank you. Oh, I'm glad you like it. Thank you. 200 or something times, that's just a random number. But you'll notice even online, and there's so much guilt that I feel of not responding to everything. But it's also I will open my phone, it's time to respond. And I just feel really overwhelmed. So that's that little part of my introversion that's okay. You have to allow yourself to heart it and like move on. And I think people will understand. And I'm not saying I have an enormous account, like in social media terms. Like I've got a sizable following, but I think that even on a following my size, people know that you can't respond to everything. And I think it's okay.
Especially, I feel like when there's statement, like when someone asks a question,
Right.
then clearly grammatically there's an implication of a response. But like when it's just a OMG love this or a bunch of emojis, I'm like,
if you respond,
like emoji back.
Yeah, in emoji bag. If you're commenting in emojis, I'm going to comment with a heart because that's totally fine. But yeah, either the question or the comment that warrants a response, like unless I miss it, I always try and get those. And I know that I miss some of those, but yeah, that is a way, even like on a post that I junk post, I will start responding to everything. And then when they start like ticking in a whole bunch, I'm like, oh, turn the app off and run away. Like, that's too much attention.
Don't let anybody see that green dot.
Right.
Like, no, I'm not on here. I'm not on here.
I'm out. I'm going to just like stick my hands in the mud so that I'm like, I can't touch my phone.
That is literally the best part about ceramics.
Yeah.
That is like what I appreciate the most. Like, nope, can't answer, can't touch it. Sorry.
Yep, I'm dirty.
So when you, just to get like, I love the fact that this has all changed so much in recent history. I mean, some people is going to think 4 years sound like a really long time, but in the grand scheme of growing a business, 4 years is very short, you know? And so from that first sale, when you were so surprised that everything was starting to sell, did you then immediately say, okay, I'm doubling down on Instagram or I'm doubling down on the internet because this is the way forward? Or that still kind of...
No, I still did some of the craft shows, but I wasn't bringing pots at all. Because, I mean, if I wasn't selling a $40 mug, chances of me selling a $250 to $500 little vessel that, like, what do you do with it, you know, would be the crowd's, I think, response was just, I knew that wasn't going to happen. So I was working on building that on one side. And then on the other side, I was still doing some of the craft shows. So 2018 was fairly craft show heavy. And at that time, I wasn't even doing the art shows. Like with my pots, I would do a lot more of like the art street shows. And then with like the jewelry stuff, like it's not an art. It is just, it's made of porcelain and gold luster, but it is not, it's just a good sort of. And so with the craft shows, I could do those. And even with the jewelry that was made in China, pretending to be a handmade object, my price point of $30 a piece still fit in with that. And so, and it was funny too, like on this business, I have the very nice words, but I also do a full line of naughty words with that. And those are the better sellers. So, you know, I mean, it was, even if it wasn't something that somebody thought they wanted or needed, like they'd come in and see, you know, like the F-bomb written in Braille. And they were like, okay, like, that's funny. I can wear it to work. So that on 2018, I kind of did a lot of those. And then I started to feel more drained by those and started to see that the more that I worked on Instagram and the work that I really wanted to make, the more that was starting to take off. And so I sort of, between 2018 and the end of 2019, you know, it really went. And then I did my last show and I said in the middle of it was in December of 2019, this is my last show. I don't want to do this anymore. And that actually was another one of those things that really worked out because 2020, they weren't really doing any shows. So the fact that I made this decision to just go all online at a time when we all had to, right before that, you know, this was in December of 2019 is when I made that decision. And it served me well, you know, at least for how to conduct my business during the pandemic.
Absolutely. Like that, it was mentally a positive place to be as opposed to a place you got forced into.
Absolutely. Yeah. So many people did not do the internet at all. And then they were just like, well, I'll just do it now. And it's like, well, not that easy. You know, you really
might not work.
You really have to work it. It doesn't just happen. So yeah, I did feel lucky when things actually happened that way. I had to be where I was, but I wanted to be there. I was already there. So Although
Yeah.
it was still scary. I had no idea. I mean, I was working towards a big exhibition when the whole world shut down. And with the exhibition, I was like, A, nobody's coming to this. And B, like, I am self-employed. I can't do this or think about this right now. I need to make the things that I know people will buy, if people can buy anything. Because everybody I knew was like losing jobs, and especially like being in the arts, a lot of people are either doing the cash shows or they're, even if they have their business, I was doing a residency at the time too. And so a lot of people there weren't necessarily making work to sell work. They were at the residency to make work, and then they had a job to support themselves. And so a lot of those jobs, being in things like the service industry or hospitality, were just shutting down. And so a lot of my very direct community was losing jobs. And so I had no idea if I had a job or not. And so that was a weird time. But then, very luckily, having already been established online, I was able to keep selling online. And a lot of people wanted their home to be more beautiful because they were stuck there. So I know that several artists that I know that were selling all online at that time, it worked out, which is good.
Absolutely. Yeah, I had a follow-up question. I did. It's floating somewhere.
back.
Oh, I know. So when that point came of saying, okay, December 2019, I'm not going to do any shows anymore. I'm going to totally go online. Does online for you basically mean Instagram marketing, driving people to a website, shop update, sale, rinse and repeat?
So Instagram, yes. Email is a big one too, to just have people get on your email list
because I've said that 20 times. So if they don't believe me, believe Kate.
But I mean, Instagram and email have the same problems. Like, I announce all of my sales, except for this last one, via email only. And then people will not see my email because they're automatically in that like promotional folder or in the junk mail folder, even though the people signed up for this and they double opted in. So like, why are you going to the junk mail folder when I'm now getting like $5,000 gift card to Lowe's? I'm like, I didn't. Why is this here? Like, so that's in my main email box, but my email.
At least you will still own that email list, regardless of what happens to Gmail in the future or whatever. Like that is the big
100%. And so, I mean, my email list is drastically less than what my Instagram following, but those numbers are people that are exactly interested in buying, because that's what I'm promoting my business or that email list for, is get on my email list to find out about all shop updates or, certain exclusives or sale prices or discounts or, like anything like that. That's what it's for. So most of my business is the singular day of selling, sell out. I have two sides of things. I do pre-orders and already made. The artwork that I do, which is like the shelfies and planters and just whatever I feel like making, that is the quote unquote ready-mades. And I make a bunch of those, whether it's, like 10 to 20, because they're very labor intensive pieces. And then I just show the whole process of them, of like how I'm doing it. And then I have the sale and they sell out, luckily. And every time I'm horrified they won't, but then I just pack. So I try and have my packing when it's the ready-made done within, depending on the date, if I'm selling on a Saturday night or something, obviously I'm not going to get them out the next day, but within 48 to 72 hours is when they ship, because even if it's only 20 pieces, they're complicated to pack. So then the pre-orders now are mostly the Minnie Mouse burners, and so those ones I've now been able to, I've been tweaking it a little bit because, as a maker business, it's all trial and error and throw something at the wall and see what sticks. So those ones, on the 15th of every month, I release 50 of them. And if I advertise for them on social media and I send 2 emails, if I send one email a few days beforehand and then another email the day of the sale, they will sell out. I tried in March. I had this I just want to see what happens. And I made one story that said, check your email. And I sent one email, and then I was just in Sika. I'm going to just not think about it, and I sold 37 of the 50. So
get an email
give
list.
me-
That's
yeah.
the point.
So that one was kind of my attempt at saying, like, if they just show up and I'm a little silent about it, what happened? And then I let them. No, I think during the week I sold like 30. And then over the next week while I was there, I sold a few more people coming to my website. And that's the only time I've let something just silently sit there. Like, and I decided that I didn't love that. And then I paid my taxes. So for April, I was like, okay, I'm going to do this. And so I did 100 in April, which is,
Sold out. I'm just going to say, spoiler alert. I watched that happen.
yes, I did. And I'm blown away. Like, it is straight up cuckoo bananas to me that I could sell 100 of those objects and in a day. I also have now, with that line, I am developing accessories to go with that. So I have the mini burner, which is like the main piece. And that is, for people who don't know who I am or what my work is, those are little incense burners that look like the mid-century modern, like Malm or freeway fireplaces. And they're about 9 inches tall, and they have a little opening, and you can put any kind of incense that fits in there, and they're cute, you know? And then I have all the accessories that go with it. So the first accessory I developed was the match strikers. So that one looks like a little mid-century fire pot or flower pot. So it has the teeny tiny little pot. And then I have a good friend of mine who I met during craft shows. She's a laser cutter and woodworker and stained glass artist. She laser cuts the little H-shaped legs that then make the like mid-century modern legs. And so that's up there. And then it has, you can pick your color to match your mini man. And then it has the strike anywhere matches and the stripe of just the raw clay, and the strike anywhere matches strike on raw clay. And then it comes with a little disposal pot. So when your match is burned out, you can stick that in there. And those ones are always available on the website. So that's one that I've just like, I have a product on the website that I can be gaining income throughout the month between sales. My most recent accessory that I developed is a little log holder. So it's also in the mid-century modern aesthetic of the little 2 rings that kind of lean against each other, and they have the basket underneath. And in the log holder, it fits all different types of incense. And then something that I've developed that I never in wildest dreams thought I would do is now I sell incense that you can put in all of these things. And so I've developed wholesale accounts with small businesses around the country that I wholesale incense from, and then I can just sell them direct on the website. So that one is actually a source of revenue that I'm getting that I do not have to make the thing, which is really helpful and something that Thayer, my sexy wholesale and fulfillment manager, can do, which is just get into the studio, you know, like on Monday mornings and just see what incense I've sold and just stick them in an envelope and put a label on there. Like my packaging.
You can even put them in a regular mailbox, maybe.
Yeah, like a lot of them fit there. Like the padded envelope that I use, which is, I do plastic-free packing materials, which is very important to me. So I do the like little, it's the compostable, like inside of paper envelopes. And so, I mean, a lot of them you just put a thing, you don't have to wrap it. Like peanuts or paper involved. You just stick it in this envelope, and then you put like a thank you card and a business card and candy, which is important. I put candy in all my stuff, and you just put a label on it and it's ready. So that one was something that I really felt like, is this a weird thing that like an artist is now selling a resold good, but it's on brand.
I was going to say it all fits together. And the immediate thing I thought of was you specified the fact that like you were working with other small businesses. And I don't know that it matters as much in the US. I used to be very like, has to be US made or whatever. But to me, it's more important that it's a small business and someone's getting paid well.
And not only,
someone's getting paid the price that they need to get paid.
All the businesses I work with are in the US, but some of the incense are imported because, I mean,
it was originally a Western culture thing.
Well, actually, you know, interestingly, when I looked into this, like basically every culture has had a type of incense. I mean, even Catholics, go there and you're going to be smelling burning leather, you know, so.
Hey, it was just Easter, so.
Right. I mean, you don't really get much more Western culture than Catholicism. So There's a lot of incense.
I mean, do Anglicans have? Well, I'm trying to think of like how white can we go?
Right.
Like, does the Church of England use incense? This is now my question. We'll follow up on the next podcast episode.
The Church of England, but I know that like burning sage is
True, like Native American culture.
Yeah, but that's white
like,
sage.
also.
But like German culture burns sage too. So it's not
Fair.
white sage. I mean, it could be blue sages or like other types of just dry sage. I mean, a lot of the sage that I burn is not white sage. I just grow sage in my garden and I dry it and I burn it.
My mom's going to hate me for bringing up this story, but I can't resist.
Do it.
Because we're talking about cultural appropriation, right. I need to bring in some levity and humor. So I was joking about the fact that I thought that the house we're in, which is was built in 1927. I was like, I'm pretty sure there's ghosts because like we moved and I just couldn't find, there were things I couldn't find. Like we have lost 5 coasters somehow. 5. There's 2 of us in the house. How does a person lose coasters?
Right.
Like how they were on the table and now they're not.
You mentioned
and I still can't find them and it
dog.
drives me nuts. Yes, but there was never any sign of coaster in any bowel movement afterwards. So I can't imagine that the felt
Right.
fully broke down. I would have seen it. Oh yeah. No, he's never done that. So that's a much more logical explanation. My explanation was ghosts,
Which
clearly.
I'm all for ghosts. I was just talking to my cleaning lady about ghosts today and our experiences.
So there we go. So I'm joking about this. My mom and dad are coming up to visit. And so she must have said something to a friend of hers because they said, well, she should burn sage in the house. And sorry, Mom, but this is the best story ever. Mom shows up with fresh cut sage. I died. I mean, like 4 little cute, like I think we used it to make some pasta. I was like, what are we going to do with this?
So I'm not name dropping at all, but one of my favorite things to burn is lavender. So I show little videos of, whether it's lavender that I take from my garden or like I make little lavender bundles or so on and so forth. And I had been showing all of this. And then several collectors who have me email burners were just like, oh my God, I'm going to do the same thing. So they just went straight out to their garden. They cut down some lavender and they just kept trying to light it. And they're like, it's not working. They finally figured it out on their own and then messaged me to just share their story of burning like a totally fresh flower. How well it worked.
But I love that you're burning your own sage too, though, because white sage has gotten fully appropriated and be like, maybe we shouldn't. Like,
absolutely. And especially
maybe we shouldn't.
Right.
Please don't order that.
So I mean, it's kind of with all things. If you are going to get it, make sure that you're getting it from a source that is reputable. And so some sources are people, if it's like on private land and they continuously either replant or sage is a bush. I mean, if you prune a little bit, it will grow back. And if you're going to burn it, understand that I'm not going to get too far into this topic because it is such a hot topic of appropriation, but there are ways that you can appreciate further than you can appropriate. And as long as you're doing it in an absolute respect of an understanding of the cultural significance of these things, then, if you're just out there like, I'm totally like smudging and you're putting a fully white lens on it, that is very problematic. So one of the things that I do, and I've had conversations with a lot of people about it, is Palo Santo, which can be one of those hot ticket, however I'm saying this. I exclusively wholesale through Sacred Wood Essence. And this is a company that is dedicating to reforestation of Palo Santo. And they're also, I'm not going to butcher the Latin name of it. There are 2 varieties of Palo Santo. One of them is endangered. The other one is of least concern. And that is the one that I sell. And as best as I can, I try to bring knowledge to cultures who had burned this ceremoniously. But I also use a company that by using them, it's providing jobs to people in Ecuador, and it is fully replanting. So for every time that I order, they replant dozens of trees. And I'll get email updates on like, these are pictures from 5 years ago, and these are pictures now. And the other thing with Palo Santo is you cannot, illegal in Ecuador, to cut down the trees to harvest it. It has to be a tree that naturally died, laid on the forest floor for over 10 years, and then locals harvest it and cut it, and then they're the ones selling to Sacred Wood Essence, who then uses profits to reforest the land. So
That's beautiful.
if you are going to do it, make sure you're doing it in the best way that you can do it. And I will say that from my strictly white lens, one of the things that I love about it is it looks like little logs, because it is. But it is important to me to fully support organizations that will reforest and respect the cultures that brought it to the attention of white people,
Right.
Yeah.
And actually, I love that you mentioned that, because the more important point I wanted to make was with your concern about, is it weird that an artist and a maker is selling repurposed goods, because we're having this conversation about, wholesaling mugs from China and putting designs on them and all this kind of stuff. And the thing that I always come back to is the point that you just made is, as a small business owner with attention and kind of a moral guidance, if you will, and morality is a whole different thing, but like having a social consciousness around the impact of your small business, you are now creating so much. There's an exponential positive result as far as your small business grows. You mentioned you have another local maker who is doing the 3D wood cutting of the little stands for the pot holders. You're partnering with this company and that partners with people in Ecuador, and the job creation. There is so much, that ripple effect is what I'm getting at, like that I think is so much greater for small businesses in our local and worldwide economies because of being conscientious about it. And so the wholesaling incense and selling it, it fits with the work that you're already doing. There's a connection there. It's not like all of a sudden you're selling t-shirts or whatever, although I think your illustrations would look probably
I've
pretty
been
good on a
looking at
t-shirt.
stuff, and a lot of people have been asking me for apparel, so it's being thought about, and obviously that'll be marketed as this is not a handmade item, just has my illustrations on there. I'm the designer, not the maker.
Right. But even when we start to go down these different rabbit holes of things to sell, like there still can be so much intentionality around it that jives with that maker spirit, that jives with that recognition of all the society's woes and whatnot.
And my goal is, just to support small businesses. And, and I do think that it is, of course, important to support your local economy, but as we're seeing right now, the globe is our economy. Just we're already on heavy subjects right now, so I'm not going to get into like everything, but the amount of, just because we were talking about retirement accounts earlier, and even my financial advisor was just like, well, the stock markets are kind of bonkers right now. I mean, it's like the situation in Ukraine, which is heartbreaking, is having a global impact. The best way to describe it is, especially during the Suez Canal, everything and around the holidays, and people were wondering if their Amazon stuff would arrive in time, and then everybody's saying, well, don't support big companies like that, support local makers because they are, here. And it's like, yeah, but I get my clay from a company in California, and that company gets all of the materials and minerals that they need globally. And right now, the talc mines, like all of the formulas of our clays and glazes and stuff, are being tweaked by the best chemists there are, because the mines that all of the stuff we were using are drying up. And talc from one mine and talc from another mine are two totally different beasts. So even as a local maker, or, like a farmer's market potter, of course you're supporting them, but where they get the materials to make that work that was made in your town is global. We don't live in a local economy anymore. We live in a global economy.
Yep. And for me to put a pin in it, and I also know I'm taking up so much more of your time than I feel like we could each, I'm like, can we just pour cocktails and keep going?
I'm sick today, so I'm just like finally talking to somebody.
Well, but to put a pin on it, I think the point is, and I use this phrase with everything. I use this phrase when I teach people how to take better photos. I use this phrase for everything, like being intentional and conscientious. And it takes a lot of work and it takes a lot of effort, but doing the research, it doesn't matter if it's local or not. It matters because like you could also have a local person whose values you don't agree with, or whose not paying their workers properly. You know what I mean? You could have a local shop that's having quote unquote free interns from college that actually are doing work that should be paid for. Or
All
there's a
work
million
should be
different.
paid for.
Oh God, we've opened up. This has like been the Pandora's box now of social
I know, like, how many
issues
social topics
presented.
we talk about?
Also presented to you by two highly informed white
Yeah, I
girls.
was just that's the thing that I kept saying while I was talking. I was like, oh my God, this is just a conversation of, even as conscientious as I try to be, like, I am still a white woman who lives in the Midwest, and I'm just probably saying a lot of terrible things, and not intentionally. I am intending to do the right things.
But I am also very open to people emailing me and helping educate me.
Great.
So by all means, don't be shy. However many times I put my foot in my mouth, please call me out on it so I can become better.
Yes.
All right, back to pottery. We're talking about important things. If you don't get a little bit anxious or nervous, I feel like maybe it's not that important. So I'm still just going to sit here in amazement and in excitement for you that you are figuring out how to like make a living from the things you make, but not only for yourself, but for your husband, for your assistant. I didn't even know that you were right in this moment with your business. And it's funny how the timing of things works out. It's amazing.
Yeah. Well, my assistant is somebody who, she's part-time with me. I hired her at the beginning of 2021 in January to work 3 to 5 hours for me. She's up to usually 15 to 20 hours a week now. She's also a teacher. She's a part-time teacher and then part-time works for me. This summer, she's not going to teach summer school. So we are launching a wholesale line for the mini mount burners and accessories. And so hopefully, the goal, I'd love to steal her from this school and have her work for me as on more of a full-time basis. But we're testing the waters as a small business to see if this summer it's a feasible thing. It would also mean, because right now she's contract employee for me, which means that she makes her own hours. She uses a lot of her own tools. So a lot of the stuff she does, she can work from home, or both, because she's my first actual employee. So as me as the business owner, it's slow learning how to do all her tech stuff. I have to do my own, and that's scary. No learning hers. But, wanting as much as possible to have her also supported fully in the arts, I think, is important.
Well, and a 1099 is something entirely different than a full-time employee, and all the legality that goes around with that.
So there's going to be a lot. My CPA has been the one that's like, as long as possible, stick with 1099, and she's happy with 1099. We talk about it. I don't want to be the boss that's just like, this is what we do. These are regular, quarterly talks. Because once she's an employee, her schedule won't be as flexible. So now it's kind of like, I texted her yesterday because my husband was sick. I'm like, I can't be there today. Like, I might have whatever this is. And especially right now, this is not a COVID thing. This is more of like a stomach flu thing. But I don't want to be a vector of disease. So it's like me just saying, I'm not going to be there. You could go to the studio and pick up what you need to do. But she has a slab roller, she has an extruder, she has all those things at home. So if she wants to just be at home, she can. And I trust her to put her hours in correctly, and she trusts me to have work for her to do.
Well, what haven't we, dare I even open up, but is there something that, I'm trying not to ask a question that leads us to another 45-minute deep dive, because I don't want to take, your time is valuable and I've already used way more of it than I promised. So is there something that you feel like you wish people knew about, either you or the business or the life of making a living from the things you make that, maybe they don't see on Instagram, or you think they kind of, dreaming of being in your shoes right now, basically?
I mean, for me, it has been consistently just keep playing, keep doing whatever you want to do. And if there is a thing that strikes a chord in people, you can decide how much energy you want to put into that. So one of the first things that I did that seemed to strike a chord in people, strangely, first was kind of the braille jewelry, and people really liked that, but my heart isn't in that. So it's a business that at this point I'm not selling or doing anything with. I have my wholesale clients that I continue to wholesale to, and I'm happy that it's just a low key business, but I'm not going to continue to. I was going to trade like wholesale trade shows, except with that line for a while, but it did not bring joy to me. And as makers, if we're trying to make a business in a dream job, do what brings joy to you. If you're cranking out, so who was it? Oh, I'm blanking on it, but she has a joke that like she lives in the house that garlic graters built of like the little ceramic, you throw it and then you like score up the thing and you can like grate your garlic on it. And so in early in her career when she was doing mostly craft shows and things, these little $8 objects are what paid her bills. She didn't love them, but it was such a fast object and it worked and it literally bought her house. So something like that, ask yourself if that main money making object is worth it. I've had other things in the past that I think could have gone somewhere if I pushed it, but I let them fizzle because I wasn't as excited in them. And I love to play and experiment and change my work. Weirdly, I'm not over these mini mound gardeners yet. Like it is, I think one of the things is it's an object that once it's done, I can play with it, and so I'm still getting the play. And my assistant and my husband have been really able to help. Like my husband is a trained artist. He worked for 10 years as principal printer in a fine art lithography shop. His boss retired from production. And turns out, fine art lithography is not a thing you just see on every corner. So that's when he went to USPS, and that was always supposed to just be a placeholder job. He needed a job, and he'd applied to several print shops, but he was overqualified, and they were going to be paying too little. So this is something in the future, and we could possibly talk about it later, but one of the reasons that he's getting his MBA is because eventually we'd like to start our own print shop, and where that is his business and then I run my business, but I could still, my studio could move to wherever that location is or what have you. So getting the MBA, moving to him, and our decision for him to do that is because I have the street smarts of running a business, but now he's learning all of the technicalities of it. And so like some of the things, he's in 2 marketing classes this semester. And he keeps being like, hey, do you know that you use this principle of marketing? And I'm like, no, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just doing, I'm throwing something at a wall and hoping it sticks. And he's getting lots of ideas. So this summer, when he's not in class and can also start working more hours for the business, he can start implementing some of these. So he's in some Google Analytics class, and then is a thing I know absolutely nothing about, but he's already certified in Google Analytics. I don't know how. I don't know, but he's doing that. And so he's going to Google Analytics my business. We're going to hopefully.
Is that a euphemism? I feel like that's a euphemism.
I love it. Hopefully with our 2 skill sets now, we can build something more. But I brought that whole thing up because he, as a 2D artist, the thing that, aside from packing and shipping things, one of the big things that he does is cuts out, because all the burners are slab built. And so he rolls out slabs and cuts out shapes. Rolls out slabs and cuts out shapes. And my assistant Katie has been able to start helping me make them, which is, she worked with me for over a year before any of her final products were ones that are going out the door. If you get a mini mound at this point, it might have been made by me and it might have been made by a team. At some point, my hand touches it. I don't want to be an artist that I'm not touching the work at all. I think it's important, when people buy my work, they're buying my name. And I think it is very important to be involved in it, at the very least, one step. But yeah, I would also say that if you are starting to find, I'm going to just tie this in. It can be really easy as a small business owner and a maker and all of these things to not sleep. And that's hugely important. So 1, get at least 7 hours of sleep.
Two, if you are starting to find that you do not have enough hours in the day to do what you're doing, find help. Because without Katie as my first assistant, who I was like, I think I need help. Can you literally cut shapes for me? That was her first job. And I need you for 3 hours, maybe 5 hours a week. And that has just naturally, there's never necessarily been huge conversations about it with her. It's just, hey, I need you more. Can you throw in some more hours here? Can you do this? And normally she works 2 8-hour days with me, but on really busy weeks, or if we're like, ooh, we maybe took a little too much time off in this month of production. Now we're like down to the wire and we got to get these things out by this date. She will come in more, but I could not have grown this without her help. And I was so scared to have someone, A, that I had to pay because I was scared about paying myself, and B, and paying her a good wage. The start rate in the Midwest, which we live in a cheapish place, I wanted to start her at $15 an hour. And I've been able to give her a raise in that amount of time. But I think that for me, knowing how valuable of an asset she has become lets me want to tell more people how important it is to outsource some of the work, because I am a perfectionist. I get it. I know that people are buying art, but if you have something that they can do, let them do it. And it will change how you operate. And you can then use your extra time to sleep more.
I love that.
Yeah, that's a big part of it.
I love that. That was when I first started bringing on photographers onto my team. It also, for me, allowed me to charge what I should be charging, because it was like, no, I'm supporting them.
Yeah.
It was no longer just about me. It was like protecting and honoring their time, and in many ways made it a healthier business, not just from the time standpoint for myself personally, but just like a acknowledgement of the work and the value and the, people deserve to be paid well and all of these other things that we often like don't treat ourselves that way, but are easier to support other people in that way. So and it's so exciting to be able to support other people. Like, that's like, it's overwhelming and stressful, but it's also like really amazing to think like, oh, because I gave you these hours, you were then able to do XYZ in your spare time, or pursue this interest, or do this other thing, absolutely.
I think, just with you were saying, pay yourself what you're worth. If you are going to be selling, no matter how you're selling, something that I have learned is, it is very hard to price something to begin with, but find in the first time you sell something, find a price that you think is fair. And when it sells out, no matter how long it takes for that thing to sell out, raise the price. Because if it's sold out at that price, that means that it was too low. So I will say this, my burners are one.
This is actually like proven pricing research and psychology. I want people to know this is not just your opinion. I'm freaking out over here on this side, because this isn't just a very smart thing Kate's saying. It's like, no, this is a thing. This is real.
It's real.
Keep going.
I don't do that with the burners. I've raised them 10% after consistently selling for a year, because this is just my one. This isn't it is art, but it is a production line. So I want people to know that this is the thing. But like on my artwork, so my Shelfies, for example, those I started selling them in 2020, the beginning of 2020, in January of 2020. So before the world crashed and burned, I started them, I think, at $150, which for me, a cup for $150 was very scary. This last round that I just sold at the end of March sold out in less than 10 minutes for $250. And that was based on me raising my price $5 to $10 every time I sold them. And that's how quickly it almost doubled in price. The customs that I do of those, I think I started at $185 and they just sold out at $450. And that is because I've realized how much time I'm actually putting into these objects. And it felt burdensome because I didn't think that I was making enough for the hours that I was putting into it. By the time I was done, I loved it. But as I was working, I was like, oh, I didn't realize I actually put like 20 hours into one of these. And then when it's like $185, you're like, well, it probably could have been more. And so those ones I've been raising the price steeper because every one of those I've ever made is one of a kind. The customs are so one of a kind. They're based on people's objects and their life experiences. So those are a thing that I've been able to more quickly raise the price. And I've truly been astonished that 5 years ago, I was still struggling to sell a $45 mug. And then last month I sold out of $450 mugs because I've been consistently raising my price when things sell out.
I love it. That's like the most mic drop. That's the mic drop moment. That's the end. There we go. It's also because you found your thing, I think.
Yeah.
You know, not to open up another, but like just, it wasn't just like you were raising the price from 45 onward up to 450, just to clarify for anybody who maybe walked out of the room while they were listening to this episode or something. If you weren't fully listening, like you found the thing that you got excited about, and it's easier to sell things we're excited about.
Right, exactly.
So, oh, thank you so much for so much of your time.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm 100% going to have a round two. I feel like it would be fascinating to have the two of you on and talk about business and MBAs, and that's amazing. I'm so excited. I'm also excited that I found another couple, self-employed couple. So like, I need a little club. Yeah. Can we please meet once a week?
Yeah, I mean, we're both in the Midwest. I mean, it's probably only like a 7-8 hour drive,
which is like nothing to us.
I love it. I love it.
Okay, for people who somehow haven't seen the Shelfies, don't know your work, don't know you, where on the interwebs should we send them?
So either Instagram is a really big place, and that is just at kate.schroeder.ceramics. And Kate is easy enough, Kate. Schroeder is the one that's going to throw you for a loop. That's SCHROEDER. Looks like Schroeder. It's spelled just like the Peanuts character for anyone old enough to know that reference. And ceramics. And then my website is exactly the same, except there's no dots in between. It's just KateSchroederCeramics.com. If you're on TikTok, it just started when I posted two. I don't know how I feel about it, but it's that mentality of I'm always afraid, everything's going to crash and burn. So the last few times I've tried to post something, I got frustrated and I gave up. And I just did just the old Instagram because I know how to work it. My website has a lot of stuff if you want to get on that email list. You'll find it right on the website or on the link in my bio on Instagram. So that's how you find me.
They will be linked in the show notes, which for people who don't know where show notes are, you can just go to makersplaybook.com/podcast. Awesome. Thank you so much, Kate.
Welcome.
And that wraps up episode 308. What a crazy ride this whole artistic self-employment journey can be, right? I'm reminded of the quote we recently shared on Instagram from episode 205 with Matt Katz of Ceramic Materials Workshops. The only way to make a career in ceramics is to not quit. And I am so encouraged by the way Kate has managed to follow the type of style of work that inspires her and brings her joy to make into something that is ultimately more successful than anything else she was making before. It's amazing to me because I remember all the way back to our very first episode 101 with Camille Beckles of Camille at the Wheel, and how she said, first make what you enjoy making. And so many other creators since that first episode have kept saying that. But if I'm being totally honest, I always heard that advice and was like, yeah, that's a great thought and something you can totally do when ceramics isn't your only income or when you have support from a partner's employment or insert whatever other lame excuse I had for myself there. But now, faced with Kate's story, making what you love isn't just an emotionally smart thing to do for your own mental health and well-being. It can also pay the bills. I'm guessing that my excuses aren't by themselves. I'm guessing, or maybe better yet, hoping, that I'm not the only one when I come up with reasons something works for one person, but why they won't work for me. Hearing stories of how things can work in a wide variety of ways to finally convince ourselves out of our own, frankly lame excuses is precisely why I love the supportive conversations that are happening, you guessed it, inside of the community. If you've listened to any of the last couple episodes, you've heard me talk already about this incredible home that we've curated for the Makers community. So I won't prolong this episode with all of those same details again. If this is your first episode you've ever listened to, well, first off, hi, welcome. I'm really excited that you're here. And if you're curious and you're like, wait a second, I didn't hear those last episodes. What the heck is this online home for makers? What does that mean? Well, you can just check out more at makersplaybook.com/community. The added perk of joining this amazing group is that by doing so, you are also very tangibly supporting the creation of this very podcast. Plus, there's a 2-week free trial right now. So you can literally pop in, have a look around, decide if it's the right thing for you or not, without any financial risk whatsoever. Oh man, just bringing up the subject of the community, there are so many other good things happening inside of that space. So I'm just going to stop right now before I ramble on too long and you get sick of me and this episode is way too long. Long story short, if you want to learn more, you can click the link in the show notes on whatever podcast listening app you are listening to right now, or type in makersplaybook.com/community into your favorite web browser. All right, my friends, until next week, go get back to making your dreams a reality, because together, we've got this.